Tiger Woods shot a 74 at the Masters. What does that tell me? Well, he sucks at golf. Okay? I mean, that's what it tells you. You know, you can interpret that data in lots of different ways, and that's one thing that we have to work on is how do I interpret this data that I'm seeing? Okay? If I look out the window and I see 5 girls and 3 guys walk by, how do I interpret that? Well, let's see. There's 8 people walk by, 5 were women and 3 were men. You know, maybe that's a way of interpreting how many men and women there are on campus. Maybe it's a way of me determining what time those students are having class. Women tend to have class at this time, men tend to have class at that time. Different ways that I can interpret the data that I'm collecting, or that I'm observing. Okay? But that's what statistics is. Statistics is all about analyzing data. And the key ideas behind statistics is that how can I make the best analysis of the data that I have, and how can I make it apply to the largest groups possible. Okay? So statistics, typically when we work with analysis of data, we work with what are called samples, and we work with populations. These are the main 2 things that we focus on when we're looking at analysis of data. What is the sample that I'm working with? What is the small collection of data points that I have? And then the larger question is what does that small collection relate to? Is there a larger group that I'm not collecting data from? Is there a larger group that I can take this sample data and apply these results to? That's what I'm wanting to do with statistics. All right? Now, on the other end of the spectrum, we have this thing called probability. And probability, as we've talked a little bit about, probability deals with odds. Okay? Yes, that is. It does. It deals with odds. But what else does it deal with? What is probability? How would you, if someone came up to you and said, give me an example of probability. Go ahead, dare you.
The probability of you getting 90% on the test.
Okay? So when people talk about probability, one thing they always want to do is they want to relate it to a real world thing. They want to relate it to something real, something tangible that you can identify with. It's the probability of getting 90% on the test. Okay. Well, you know, there's a lot of things you have to answer in order to come up with a good answer on that. Right? One thing you have to look at is, okay, how many questions are on the test? What if there's only 2 questions and they're each worth the same? Probability of getting a 90% with just 2 questions both being worth the same, it's almost impossible, right? I mean, how do I get a 90% when there's only 2 questions and they're both worth 50%? Okay. What else? What else is probability? How else would you describe probability to someone based on your own experiences?
Predict an outcome.
Predict an outcome? Okay. So maybe under probability we can talk about prediction.
Predictions based off of statistics.
That in parentheses for a moment. There are some connections between probability and statistics that we'll look at. Okay? A lot of what we want to use probability for is to answer questions involving statistics. For example, one thing that we'll get to later on in the course is, suppose that I want to know what the average yield of wheat per acre is in Kansas. And I go to 5 different farms, and I find that on those 5 farms, the average yield per acre is 1,400 bushel. Okay. What's the probability that the average yield for the whole state of Kansas is 1,400 bushel?
About 2%.
About 2%. That is sort of where we're taking data that we've collected and using it to analyze something about a probability. Okay? That's sort of where we start looking at the marriage between statistics and probability, how they're connected, how they're used in conjunction to answer questions that we're interested in. Okay? So yes, probability does deal with predicting outcomes based on statistics. Another way of